Who knows how long men and women have wondered about existence? Who knows how long they've looked for meaning and understanding of what is life and what is it like to be alive? Vast, yet intimate. A mystery, yet the dance of knowing. The dance of discovery, the dance of truth. Many have pursued the truth in religions, science, mysticism, shamanism, and it seems that in each coming age there are new voices that emerge like fresh new growth on some sort of magic plant, adapting to the current time and the current climate, yet remaining true to a timeless sense. In the late 1970s and the early 1980s, a new, unique and modern approach to answering some of these great spiritual questions began to develop in Colorado and California. This eventually became known as the Diamond Approach. At the spearhead of this new investigation into truth was A.H. Almaas. He was soon joined by Karen Johnson and friends. In the next hour, Nancy Sabanya will take us on a series of interviews with A.H. Almaas, Karen Johnson, and several of the teachers in the Diamond Approach. We hope to answer many of the frequently asked questions and to give you a full introduction to the true nature of the Diamond Approach.
How did the Diamond Approach develop? What's the history? How did it come to be?
As Karen said, when we first met in Colorado, and I was going to be doing what we call a returning process then, which is some kind of development of what's called the Fisher-Hoffman process. And Sandra, our friend then, Sandra, Karen, and myself were living together. So after we did the process, finished, I decided to start a group, a continuing group. And before that, just a little before that, I don't know, a year or so before that, I made a discovery, which later I called presence. I've worked with the concept of essence before, essence through nature, but I never really knew how the experience manifests. And nobody who taught it basically said exactly how it is. So I was experiencing at some point this thing that arises, which I recognize as presence, I recognize as my true nature, and then talk to Karen about it. And when they talked to her, she also started experiencing it. And we started talking about it a lot. And from that, there developed some knowledge, because as staying with the present began to have qualities, different qualities, like sometimes love, sometimes compassion, sometimes clarity. And then each quality got connected with some kind of psychological constellation that I was having, or Karen was having. So insights were developing about that, about the connection between the psychological constellations and those qualities of presence or essence. And I started introducing those things to the group little by little that I was working with. So that's really how that approach started and how the school started.
I think also there's something very foundational to that was the fact that we were talking all the time. We had a lot of time and we were talking about all kinds of things. So I learned about what he had known about various spiritual traditions and things that he had done, and we had a communication that was the foundation for that.
So it was easy to have a conversation because we were talking about the same thing then. Mm-hmm. At the beginning, and a lot happened since then.
Yeah, a lot happened.
And nobody knew it was going to be a teaching. You know, we thought just we're having some experiences and our own experience and realization. It took a while to find out that there is actually a teaching that wasn't just personal to us, that I think will be useful to other people.
How I got involved in the Diamond Approach? It was a phase in my life where I was looking around at a lot of different systems, and where I was, there were many different spiritual systems, meditation practices, massage trainings, psychological work, spiritual work. A lot was available, and for me initially the Diamond Approach was just one in a series of work that I was doing, and it all had value for me. And still I was in a phase of going pretty quickly from one system to another, and I would get something useful but not really stay with it and move on to the next. When I did the Diamond Approach initially, there was a 3-month process that we did, and I figured at the end of that 3 months I would be done with it and I would move on to something else.
The first real movement came because I served on the city council in Littleton, Colorado, and I got extremely frustrated. And I moved into a whole search phase, and part of that was doing some Tai Chi Chuan, a little bit of transcendental meditation, a few other things, and that eventually led me to the Fisher-Hoffman process, which it turned out that Hamid was doing. And so I walked in on one Friday night and saw Hamid not looking at all like I expected him to look. I thought he would be this big Arab instead of a relatively small man with a crutch. And a little discouragement just seeing him there. I was about ready to walk out, and I said, no, I'll stick around for a while. And by the end of that session, I knew there was something about him that I would be around for some length of time, much longer than the Fisher-Hoffman process. And I thought it would take maybe as much as 2 or 3 years. And that was almost 30 years ago.
Hamid mentioned right at the end of that a group had just formed, people who had done this 3-month process with him and wanted to continue working. And so I was curious about it. And I was curious about him, both. So about the work he was doing, and it had touched me some, but there was clearly a lot that hadn't been done for me. And so I came back to this small group that he was doing, and for many years it was a process of thinking, okay, we finished the work of the Diamond Approach, this is what Hamid had to teach, and I thought I'd be moving on to something else, but then he said there would be another piece that he was going to start teaching, another segment of teaching. And each time I checked in with myself, and I was curious to find out what was going to come next. There's a little bit the feeling of having gone through a certain, like going into a house and finding a room and going all the way through the room and thinking, okay, good, I know this room, I know this house. And then noticing, oh, there's a door over in the corner I hadn't seen before. Going through that door and finding that, oh, this room is a little room in a much bigger space.
I was very much involved in working on myself through therapeutic processes because I was in so much pain and suffering, which my path had been a psychiatric nurse, and I ended up at Esalen Institute doing Gestalt work and Jungian work, and I'd been in Freudian analysis. And I was very moved by the whole connection and Gestalt work between what I was feeling and thinking and my body. And I was looking for a body-oriented therapist, and someone suggested Hamid Ali. And so I initially went to Hamid as a Reichian therapist. I did not go to him as a spiritual teacher. And my initial work with him was pretty much traditional Reichian therapy. I would be lying there breathing, going through all kinds of feeling experiences. And then over time, I'd say in about a year and a half time, he started asking me questions nobody had ever asked me. It'd be questions like, I'd be lying there breathing, and he'd go, "What are you experiencing in your chest?" And I'd go, "Nothing." And most anybody else I'd ever worked with would go to the something or have me breathe more so I'd have something to report. And he said, "What is the nothing like?" And I was like, now I'm about 27, 28 years old. And I said, "What do you," I'd driven, paying him all this money to tell him what's nothing's like. I said, "What do you mean, what's nothing like?" And, these are etched in my mind. Well, is it a light nothing or a dark nothing? And I remember just being stopped. That my usual way of processing and approaching myself I was just like stopped. And there was something in the sincerity of his asking and his actual curiosity that I actually remember clearly turning my awareness to actually reflect on his question. Like, what was the nothing like? And it opened up this whole thing, because the nothing ended up being this door into a deeper place in my soul than anything in psychology could ever touch.
Well, I come from a Islamic culture background from Kuwait, and after I finished my studies in the U.S. in '73, went back home. Sort of lost spiritually. I knew there was something missing in my life. And I had just read Carlos Castaneda. Someone turned me on to that book. And that was the entry way for me to that separate reality. Then I got a scholarship to come back and do some graduate work in Arizona. And so I invited Hamid and Faisal to my house in Tucson, and he came to visit. And at that time I was very good at doing bodywork, shiatsu. I've learned on my own. And so I worked on Hamid Ali, gave him a little what I do, and he enjoyed it. And after an hour he said, "Well, let me show you what I do." I said, "Okay." I had no idea. So he said, "Why don't you lay down on this mattress and breathe. Breathe this way, breathe that way." For about 10 minutes, all of a sudden something happened in the middle of my chest. Pop. I could almost hear it. I could not resist it. I could not do anything about it. I didn't want to resist it at the same time. And it was such a wonderful experience of something opened. He didn't even touch me. And I knew right there and then that he's the man. And then I heard about his invitation to the school to be trained as a teacher, and I had no idea what I was getting into. I just said, "Yes, I'm coming." There was some trust in the moment, in what was in store for my future, or whatever that was. When I look back, how did I do that? How did I even try to get into this work? I did. and I don't regret it. And it's been a growing process since 78 up until now, and it's still going.
We were working with people, sometimes one-on-one, sometimes in the group. The structures were not the same as they are now. So sometimes we would do private work, sometimes working in the group. And Hamid did most of the work with people at that time, but occasionally I'd see people who needed to be seen more. And we started noticing that people would be having some of these experiences over time. They'd deal with their anger, and the heat would start arising, and they'd feel presence of strength. So it just became then an experiment with seeing what people were going through.
And I felt for a long time like I was a guinea pig. Many years, actually. I felt like a guinea pig. Didn't know what was happening. Think we'll come through and go through some difficulties, learn about them, talk with Karen about it. We get insights, and then recognition that they're universal, applicable to people in general.
How would you explain this school or this path to those who are not familiar with this type of work?
It's not easy, actually, to explain to people who are not familiar with it, because it's not a Sufi school, it's not a Gurdjieffian school, it's not a purely what is called a spiritual school, it's not a psychological school, it's not a therapy, it's a completely new thing, a new hybrid. And the best way, I think, to do it is for people to read the books, as many of the books as possible, to familiarize themselves with it. But what I would say, it's a new school, a new teaching. It's a teaching that arose in the Western culture, so it's in a Western current, and included in it Western psychological knowledge, and informed by many traditional teachings that are known, like Buddhism, Sufism, Christianity, all of that. But it is its own thing, its own emergence, its own current of teaching that has developed, that does not discriminate between the psychological, the spiritual, the physical, and the spiritual. It's all as one totality. Like, that's how the teaching is self-emerged. You have to sort of visualize what essential presence is, what true nature is. It's like an intelligence, it's an organic, functioning, responsive intelligence, much more intelligent than our brain is. A non-linear intelligence that comes into an environment and manifests in it, bring up in it exactly what is needed in a way that is understood by the people in it. And it has an intelligence beyond my mind or Karen's mind or anybody else's mind. So it is very spiritual in the sense the source of it is a spiritual presence. However, it uses psychology, we use body methods, breathing methods, many kind of things.
I'm curious about how you see the diamond approach. What kind of contribution is it bringing to the world? I mean, why the diamond approach?
Why the diamond approach? Well, I mean, the obvious answer is that it's a wedding, a coming together of Western, the relationship to Western psychology and the understanding and the essential qualities of man, and how that commingling, that movement, and as I said earlier, the aliveness of this teaching, like there's nothing excluded. So the fact that we use Sufi teachings and teachings, biblical teachings about Christ and Muhammad, and but the main thing is that the teaching coming through Hamid is a living teaching, and that's why it's not about some kind of static, dead form. And I'm not saying that Christianity nor other religions or Judaism are static, but what I've seen is sometimes when these moral codes or dictums get really solid and rigid, it excludes the aliveness of the human soul in a certain way. And it also sets up a whole big thing about the superego and I'm bad, and our work with the superego I think is just brilliant and so attuned. It's attuned. So, I don't know what people know about the superego, but this structure that's kind of making you feel like shit, right? Or small or puny, or occasionally it kind of pats you on the back for a moment when you've really put out and done it right. But usually it pats you on the back and it will say, can you do that again, right? So the work with structures like that are within this ego, and we work with them in such an attuned, mindful way. So it's almost like rolling up our sleeves and going, okay, we're going to do this in some of it's very systematic in that way. The beginning work has a lot to do with the superego, because how can you really inquire? How can you let your heart be open to not knowing? How can you wonder when the structure is always going, why are you doing this, and why did you say this? And the how you get diminished and feeling small and inferior, and that's not your nature. So anyway, that work is brilliant, just brilliant.
Most spiritual traditions, whether it's Catholicism, Hinduism, Buddhism, tends to be a tendency to want to split away the negative and just kind of dismiss the ego states. And Hamid's really his great gift, and the gift of this work has been that to actually not split away any difficult feeling, whether it be hatred, despair, pointlessness, greed, I don't care what it is, desire, sexuality, whatever, that all of those expressions are a reflection of reality, of true nature, of God, of spirit, and that they come out in a kind of narrowed down way through our history, and we get to backtrack through that.
In the very early days, it was stern work. It was very direct, very confrontive, probably more than it needed to be. And the way I see it these days, there's more a quality of the holding and the support for those confrontations is deeper and more mature. So that people that could tolerate that kind of confrontation tended to stay around, and people for whom it was too much left, I think. I'm overgeneralizing here, but that seems to be something of a flavor of it. I think there's more maturity now in the support for students. The interview process is part of that. Initially, there was no interview process. People that wanted to come and do that work did, and I think there's something about the strictness of the work that was its own kind of selection process. But recognizing that we can select students that feel like they would be a good fit for the work. It's not a perfect process, that selection process, but it's more finely tuned now than it was initially. And more recognition of the difficulties that people get into while doing the work. I think this is one of the hallmarks, actually, of the Diamond Approach, in contrast to a lot of spiritual systems, that it's malleable. It adjusts itself, in a sense, to the needs of the student.
Other important thing about our work, the Diamond Approach, is that it is not a spiritual work or inner work that is separate from life. Mm-hmm. It is life. It is. Yeah. We're taking our life and make it conscious, make it clear, make it precise, make it full, make it what it can be. So it's not like a compartment of life that people think spiritual work is some side thing you do in your life. No, our work has to do with, we work with our relationship, with our marriages, our children, with our activities, our bodies, our sexuality. Everything is involved in it and integrated into the work. So the essential presence begins to pervade everything. And the discovery happens, it's not like abstract thing we're discovering. They're related to our life, with the qualities we find and relating to the relationship, to the situation, and addresses those situations and resolves them, help them.
So in that way, it's actually really non-dual, in the sense that you're not just in a state that feels like there's no dissonance between one thing or another, but it's really giving life to that boundless, vast truth that is the ground of everything, but that we are alive as that, and the world is a manifestation of that. And so that it's really, truly that there is no compartment where spirituality happens. It's not leaving this world to be in a spiritual world. It's that this world is a manifestation of that spirit.
We might not know it at the beginning in the path, and for a long time. But at some point, we begin to recognize that true nature is really the nature of everything. It is so much the nature of everything, regardless how little there is of it, that there is at some point nothing but true nature.
I've heard the school called many names. Ridhwan, the Diamond Approach, Diamond Heart, and the Work. Can you say a little bit about...
Right. Well, we decided at some point, a long time ago, to call the school the Ridhwan School. So the school itself is called the Ridhwan School. And Ridhwan, of course, is a Sufi word, which is a name of one of the archangels who is supposedly the guardian of paradise, which has to do with fulfillment and contentment and in a dynamic way. A person reaches a place where one is fulfilled but is able to bring fulfillment to others. So we thought it's a good name for the school because that's how we were feeling. Many of us who were involved in it. And the Diamond Heart thing started when we established the Dat Institute. When we decided at some point to start new groups. We couldn't just add to the older group because the group was getting too advanced for new people. Started what's called the Dat Institute, which is Diamond Heart and Training Institute, which included the new groups plus training, teacher training. So the groups, we call them Diamond Heart, right? So people now call the teaching Diamond Heart, while the teaching itself, we always called it the Diamond Approach. But then now people call it Diamond Heart because the Diamond Heart groups. And the work is more like really more of a general word that we use for inner work. For the inner practice, we call it the work. So many people call their schools the work. So it doesn't really distinguish this school from other schools.
The Diamond Heart groups are groups that go through a certain progression of the teaching in a certain way, and it's part of a certain structure of the school. But Diamond Heart is also what happens to your heart when it gets clear, which is necessary for fulfillment. So also DOT is the Diamond Heart and Training Institute, but also DOT is the name of the prince that finds the precious pearl through his journeys in the wilderness.
And I think we chose the name Diamond Heart specifically because we were talking about the approach of the teaching itself called Diamond Approach, and we decided to call the groups, the program, the groups go through Diamond Heart because we thought it's a good way of talking about what is the work, what is the process. Heart in the sense that the heart is important because love of truth is very important for our work, and diamond because it brings in the precision and the exactness and the clarity that is important for our practice, because our practice is basically experiencing our direct experience, immediate experience, as a heart experience, but being clear and precise about it. That becomes the primary practice.
What does it look like to be a part of this school?
When you come into the school, often people have an interview. They find we have several structures. We have large group where the work is actually articulated, and there's exercises and lectures and various kinds of practices that are taught there. And the various teachers have different requirements of their students, and different teachers do things in a slightly different way, but the general format is a large group where the work is actually put out, and the smaller groups where there's a chance to work and do various kinds of practices together in a smaller setting, and then there's the private work. We don't expect a student to come in and listen to a lecture or a teacher speaking about something and expect them to just take on a belief system. We expect them to really inquire into where they are, to really see what their own experience is, because that's the knowledge for us, is their own experience. So we encourage questioning. We encourage questioning what they're hearing, questioning what they're experiencing, to find out really what the truth is for them.
I also noticed that different students have different relationship to the school and to the teaching. Some students take it as something they're doing for some time, right? So they spend, a few years, or 7 years, 10 years, 15 years, and at some point they leave, depending on their life situation. Some people come to the work and they feel a resonance with it, that's home, that's their work. So they stay in it. There isn't a question of a time limit. Just like if somebody is a Sufi or a Buddhist, you don't ask them how long you're going to be a Buddhist or a Sufi. It doesn't make sense. So some people who come into school are like that, related to the Dhyana approach. This is their spiritual work, this spiritual path. Spiritual life doesn't have a time limit on it. You're in it because it has become the perspective through which you learn. It's which you learn, which you develop, which you live your life. But not everybody is like that. And the school and the teacher, we don't require the student to be one or the other. It's up to the students. Some students at the beginning, they might come in sort of tentatively, they're experimenting, and at some point they might find out they really feel at home. This is really their work. They're harmonized with it, and they stay. Some people, they come in for some time, they learn something, they develop, and at some point they move on to something else. Both happen in various degrees.
How has the Diamond Approach developed into a school over the last 25 years, and what are the most significant, substantial changes you've seen in this time?
So the school started with a group. I started in Colorado, Boulder, and shortly after, a year or a year and a half afterward, I started a group in Berkeley. And these two groups became what we call the big groups now in Colorado and California. People kept coming into those groups, and I was traveling to Colorado back and forth. Karen was living in Colorado at that time, so I come here. I was living in California. She was living in Colorado, but I was going to Colorado like every other week and doing a 3-day weekend or something. And Karen will be there as part of the teaching, and so that's how it really started, with the groups like that. And then people will come in, would be added to the same group. Like I didn't start a different group, different time. Same group, you kept adding to it. Both the California group and the Colorado group. We keep adding and adding and adding to it until at some point the group has advanced long enough to add people to it would be difficult for them to absorb what was happening, because it was too advanced for them. That's when we started thinking of starting new groups. And I think the second group I started was the professional group here in California. And we also started at some point what we call the Ridhwan Foundation, which is our non-profit, spiritual organization.
Boy, a lot's happened, actually, from having groups in our living rooms to having groups in very large structures. And for me, my actual position with Hamid mostly was being in conversation with him and supporting the groups. I wasn't actually a part of the group. I attended the first night of the first group that he did, and we came home, and I worked that time. We came home, and he says, "We need to talk." And I said, "Why? Did I do something wrong?" And he said, "No, but if you're going to be in the group in this way, our relationship can't be what it is." So at that time, around in the 70s, Hamid and my relationship was really a deep process of investigation, inquiry, dialoguing, along with Faisal, and the work bloomed and developed and grew. After about 7 years, Faisal chose to leave and pursue his own interests. And for the last 25 years, the work has expanded and deepened, and my relationship with Hamid has evolved, and it's now the crucible through which the work is synthesized. I think what's grown with having more teachers come on board and having more groups outlying, I mean, there's just a lot of expansion that's happened over time, but it's been incremental over time, the expansion, and natural and organic, and nothing, it hasn't been a goal to expand. It's just expanded. The work has expanded itself. And just thinking of that whole view of how much it's grown and developed, it's really seeded itself and fostered itself more than anything.
It wasn't organized to develop or expand a certain way. Nobody had any ideas where it's going to go. It's just like, as I said, the essential presence itself really did the whole thing, brought in the experience, brought in the guidance, brought in the knowledge. We just followed it, basically, and responded. And so
sometimes reluctantly.
Yeah. Right. So the essential presence developed the teaching and really developed the school.
And the school proper, in terms of the legal part of it and the structures, is part of what we felt was necessary to support the work being in the world as part of presence manifesting within this world and the culture that we live in, and really living according to the guidelines that organizations need to have. So we began to develop a structure that would support the work in being legitimate.
Also, the characteristic of the work, of how the relationship of the student to the teachers and to the school, to the teaching, is different from the guru model. Mm-hmm. The teachers are not gurus here. We don't consider teachers as perfect masters, but the teachers have a realization, they have something to teach. So there is a devotional relationship that the student has to the teacher and to the teaching, but it's really the devotion is more toward the true nature, toward the spiritual element itself, and the teacher is a representative of it. In our school, there are levels of teachers. Not all our teachers are the same level, meaning different teachers have different levels of realization, different degrees of realization, and different capacities to teach. So people need to know that. So the deeper is the realization that the teacher have, the more the teacher can function as a guide, because the guide is true nature itself.
So the teacher is here as a guide to provide particular insights or guidance through their questioning and through their reflection with the student. The Diamond Approach teacher is somebody who's already been through the material that the student's working on, not in exactly the same way the student has been, because we're all unique, we're all individual, but enough that the teacher can recognize what the student's working with. not necessarily predict what's going to come next, but stay with the student as the student goes through the process. So there's the ability to support the student as well as guide the student. And to the extent that the teacher already embodies the qualities of human nature that the student is working on, there is a modeling. There is, maybe even call it a direct transmission from the teacher to the student, in the sense that the teacher embodies a quality, the student sees it.
In a certain way, a teacher's a spiritual cheerleader. Cheerleader, a midwife, mid-husband of the birth of the realization of a person's coming to their own truth. There's lots of ways. Different teachers talk about it differently.
There are several functions that are performed in different ways. Probably the chief function is to be a guide for a student, a guide to help them see their own qualities of being, partly by expressing them from our own true nature, but also partly by giving information and orientation toward how to find their own sense of themselves. Sometimes that function is performed as a lecturer. Sometimes that function is performed as a teacher of small groups where the group individually approaches their own particular psychological and spiritual issues. And sometimes it's working one-on-one with students, where very specifically the student can experience the depth of their psychological issues and also the depth of their true nature.
What are the practices of the Diamond Approach?
The main practice, what we call, is an open-ended inquiry, which starts so similar to Socratic inquiry in the sense asking a question because you don't really know the answer and you acknowledge one's ignorance, one's not knowing, which becomes an openness to things to emerge, and we inquire in such a way that includes true nature and its qualities, right? But inquire in all of our experience, whatever it is. And it is inquiry similar to what many people call inquiry, like psychological inquiry, scientific inquiry, but it has very specific things that are different because the inquiry is in form and expresses the qualities or dimension of true nature. And this inquiry is a unique thing. I don't think there's any other place where they do it that way. Many people, when they talk about spiritual practice, they talk about meditation, about chanting, about praying. You see, even contemplating whatever, the inquiry we have is like applying the scientific method to spirituality, combining the two, like really scientific, like experimentation, repeatable experimental setups, and inquiring into them, see what the result that arise from it. You see, so that's one reason we think our work is very Western in character, because the inquiry is a very Western kind of thing, in the sense that the West, for 1,000 years, has been very interested to find out what is the truth. The truth is not something you know and then you prove. The truth is always developing, always emerging. We're always discovering it. There's always new things that are arising.
I think what Hemi's talking about when we talk about the scientific method, it's the true scientific method where there's a real desire to know what's really there and really gathering empirical evidence for that. And that's how the work actually began, when we had experience of presence and we noticed that we would work through something and arrive at a certain kind of experience and notice that our students were also having that experience. That's what we mean by the scientific evidence for it, not just scrutinizing it, keeping detailed notes. We actually did all that, but it was within the nature of experience and seeing that experience became universal and that it was speaking to various experiences that our students had when they were going through the same kind of process of really looking into their experience with their awareness, with sensation, with really wanting to know what was there. So scientific, not in terms of being removed, scientific in terms of being completely immersed in the experiment and being the experiment, actually.
Right. And verifying it,
Verifying it.
Experientially,
Right.
not through thought and logic.
Yeah, so that's the empirical evidence, although there is a logic to it, and we do use our mind, and I think that's also something that's difficult for people to understand, is the use of mind in spirituality. That mind has a place, like all of the other capacities that we have, that our minds are capable of discriminating and really becoming very finely tuned discriminating faculties, and that in concert with the heart and its capacity to feel, and the body in its sensation, all of those can become more and more refined to where we see that the origin of all of that is true nature itself, functioning through us as mind, as heart, as body, and groundedness. But people tend to say, oh, the mind is just, that's just intellectual. The mind in concert with the heart, that dance is the precision, and the capacity for precision and the love for the truth is what takes that precision deeper and deeper and deeper. So it means using all of ourselves to open up. And the heart only, working by itself, does not allow you to actually know and see and have the view of true nature. The mind only, working in itself, can't know true nature. Can't feel it, can't love it. You have to love it and want to know it for it to open up. And that's what our path is. What ignites it is the love for the truth and the desire to know it.
We use meditations, for instance, and exercise, a traditional thing that many people do, to sensitize our experience so that our experience becomes vivid and intense and available in terms of sensation, feelings, emotion. So every whole field become very vivified. And then we inquire into that, explore what is it, what is its meaning, what is its truth, what's it about, how come it is that way. And as we inquire, it's that all that experience begin to change and transform, to reveal what's it about. Because it is natural to our being that it's natural for it to reveal what it is if we're open to that possibility. So we ask questions, but it's not like, the rote question. We're just curious. We want to find out, and we're researching it, exploring it, and things begin to bubble up, to begin to reveal themselves. So the inquiry is very experiential. That's why we call sometimes the word diamond heart. It's heart. Diamond means it has a precision and understanding. So understanding, again, is not a mental thing, but it is the experience, the experience that has a sense to it, a meaning to it, where experience, direct experience, and insight are not separate. They're the same thing. We do various meditations, practices, traditional meditations. We do visualizations, different kind of visualization. We do chanting, various kinds. We do visualizations combined with music. And all of those, basically, they're not the central practice. I call them supportive practices. In the sense, some of them develop some of the capacities that are needed for inquiry, the capacity to be aware, the capacity to be present, the capacity to concentrate, to discriminate. All these are capacities necessary for the primary practice of inquiry. But some of them also are they have evocative quality, like the chants and the visualization. They evoke qualities and which we can have a taste of. Some of the meditation also help in what's called stabilization. As we inquire, our true nature emerges, and we become more aware of the presence, the awareness, the luminosity of true nature. Deep meditation helps us stay there in a more stable way.
The tools are literally teaching us how to be present and value our present experience. You know, there's that famous Ram Dass expression, be here now, right? First of all, we have to understand what the word be means. We have to understand what the word here means. And we have to understand what the word now means. Right? And so part of the Diamond Approach's movement towards that is be here now, is literally be here. And we focus on sensing our very kind of, in a certain way, a certain kind of self-consciousness, bringing consciousness to the self, to one's experience in the moment, not from a narcissistic way, but really from a way of, if I want to know the answers to the great questions about what is this all about, what am I about, I have to start by understanding myself. And so the Diamond Heart teacher's first function is to practice the practice, to be here now, to understand the barriers to being here now, to develop the qualities that one needs to be here now, compassion, strength, a certain kind of will to support one's own beingness here now, and also to offer that presence, that practice to the student, and to be an exemplar of that practice in terms of a certain kind of being here now with them as they learn how to be here now with themselves.
What sets the Diamond Approach apart from other schools or spiritual traditions?
I think the main contribution we have, and one of the things that sets it apart really, for me, has been the development of the personal, meaning that the true human being is a manifestation of our nature in the world, something from outside of time and outside of this world is living within this world as a human consciousness. And I think the precious pearl that's spoken about in Sufism is something that I think we have a great understanding of, and I think part of it gets back to what we were talking about using the various technologies of the day and the use of psychology and the kind of rich and valuable knowledge we have psychologically. We have been able to work through the structures of ego in such a way that it actually creates a movement of transformation that allows that personal essence to be here as a person, but be true and real in a structure of being. And that's, from my point of view, one of the main things that actually sets it apart.
So many of the traditional teachings, especially the Eastern teachings, when they think of the individual, the only way they can think of it is as ego. Individual is equated with ego. In the Diamond Approach, we found out, no, the individual usually is ego, but the individual can also be true nature itself, the spiritual nature itself manifesting itself as a person, which is what Karen is referring to as a unique contribution that our work makes. And of course, the integration of the psychological and spiritual in a way that is seamless, that is organic, that arises on its own, with nobody attempting to put the two together. Like, for instance, the Diamond Approach is not a transparent psychology. Like many people think it's similar to transparent. Transparent psychology is really psychology combined with some spiritual perspective, spiritual practices. The Diamond Approach doesn't do that. The Diamond Approach, the knowledge itself that arises, the experience itself that arises, doesn't separate the spiritual from the psychological. They arise as two facets of the same thing, totally intertwined. You see? And that is, I think, it's pretty unique. I haven't seen it in any other spiritual work. And it's related to the personal quality, what we call the Pearl PM Price. Pearl PM Price is the quality of being that makes the person feel personal and like a person. And it seems it is important to work through the psychological components of our mind, meaning our historical programming, our childhood experience, to integrate that personal, to allow being or true nature to manifest as a true person. And that combines the personalness and the integration of the psychological and the spiritual. These two together make up a unique contribution, I think, the diamond approach makes, which we also think is very relevant to our culture, to our times. Because many people I know who've been doing many of the traditional teachings, they're looking for, what do we do with our life? Mm-hmm. We know about true nature, but how about our life? What happens to my marriage? What happens to my work? How is that relevant?
This particular approach allows me all of my life. I'm a builder, construction worker, and the difficulties I have in that part of my life have been the food for my own self-realization. Like bringing the difficulties in interacting in the world and with money, with clients, whatever, relationships, bringing that to my teacher, to the school, working with that material to open it up, to understand it, and to start to integrate real nature into that normal kind of life. And so now I go to work and all the same issues are there, but there's something greater that's present at the same time.
Certainly, this work is continuing to impact me on many levels. I would say that it's just bringing a sense of clarity and immediacy in terms of the investigation. The exercises in particular, I really find that there's some way in which all of my defenses and all of my unconscious areas get uncovered in, at times, quite a scary, but also in an extremely useful manner. And this retreat and other work that I've done with my teachers continues to demonstrate a deepening.
I feel that my life, I'm integrating I'm coming into life, I'm coming into form. And learning how to be embodied and interact and be personal and how to experience life through the school. The school's helping me to do that.
The impact of the school on my life seems to have been not so much changing the external things I'm doing, so much as to profoundly enrich with extra dimensions, the ways that I can appreciate the simultaneity of my being and in my structures, and the mixture of noble and narcissistic motivations. It just has brought a level of awareness, so that with that awareness comes on its own just a greater capacity of spontaneity, a greater sense of contactfulness, a greater sense of sort of feeling I'm more me than I've ever been before in my life.
And that brings up another thing I wanted to say about the development of this work and the school and the quality of this work, which is, it is not work in the sense that it is hard work. It's not like drudgery. It's not like we're, something you have to do. The quality of the work that I've experienced, that Karen has experienced, the way it happens between us and how we teach it, is a lot of love and enjoyment and excitement and adventure and discoveries. And it's not like we're having a problem we want to get rid of. We're in trouble. We want to be enlightened. And no, it's a whole thing emerges out of love and enjoyment You see, and a lot of investigation that is sort of playful, that is dynamic, and so there's a lot of energy, really, a lot of festivity to the quality, both the way the work emerged and the teaching emerged, and the way we actually teach it, and the way it happens to many of the students.
But the attitude was always of really wanting to know, really wanting to immerse, wanting to find out, and days of just immersion in investigation. So it is an adventure.
Yeah. And teaching it to groups and students comes out as sharing of the excitement and the love and the enjoyment, and it's not like, an authority who's handing down the law. We don't do that, It's more like really loving to share it, and it's a giving in it.
It's abundant.
Yeah, abundant, but it's fun.
So I don't see my path as attempting to relieve suffering in the sense that I want to create a situation where people don't feel pain. That's part of what happens when you're in touch with yourself, is that you're able to experience the delightness of beingness and the freedom, but also to enjoy it as a manifestation, not just to go into it and melt into it, although that's something that's possible. That's one of the potentials we have, is to be in the vastness and just become part of it. But we also have the potential to be in our life, to live our life, to have relationships, and to have them be real, and to have life be real. And that's the enjoyment of being, the living it.
Yeah. So how to be transcendent at the same time a human being living in the midst of life. That's really the work combines those in a sort of a very dynamic, organic way. It doesn't separate them.
Who are you? Where did you come from? What is your true nature? What is the meaning of life?